Cool. So hopefully everybody can see that. Yeah, so I guess to start off, just welcome everybody to our May meetup. And this month we've got the one and only Jon McNestrie joining us. Give us a wave. For those of you who don't know us, though, we're a tech agnostic group. So we invite talks from all areas of the tech industry, be it development, testing, IoT, you name it. We try and create a safe space for everybody so that you don't join one of our meetups and have recruiters breathing down your neck or anything like that. So there's no recruitment you'll find us at our meetups. So who are we then? So my name's Chris, one of the organizers. We also have James, Mark, and Martha. Unfortunately, Mark and Martha couldn't be here tonight. James is on the call. I believe, well, we think that he is on a train between Leeds and Newcastle. We're not really sure. Yeah, he hasn't been able to turn his video or anything. But if you want to get in touch with any of us, then there's our social media handles. Any feedback for any tech or for Jon, then yeah, do get in touch. Similarly, if you kind of want to speak at any tech or you knew anybody who might want to speak, then yeah, we can definitely get in touch with them. And it doesn't matter how big or small, if you wanted Bill Gates to come and speak at this meetup, then I mean, we can certainly try and get in touch with them, shy bands and all that, but yeah, just let us know. If you didn't want to get in touch with us individually, then we have our AnyTech social media handles. We're kind of all over all the main ones, including Discord. Don't worry though, I don't expect you to remember that. The easiest way is if you just go to the website, any.technology, and there'll be a little link at the top there to join that Discord channel. And similarly, there's pages where you can find these social media links and information about previous talks and also upcoming talks as well. Big thanks to our sponsor, Scott Logic. Yeah, I guess without them, we wouldn't have a meetup. As we've kind of said, we usually would kind of do beers and pizzas in our physical meetups, but #COVID, we obviously are doing virtual meetups at the moment, but hopefully not too long before we can return to physical meetups. But obviously, we're kind of following government guidelines, and we'll take it one step at a time. So moving on to Jon. So I've been so excited for this. I'm really looking forward to kind of hearing Jon speak. I'm sure you're all aware of who Jon is. He's a big person in the Northeast, organizer of Agile Northeast, and a true coach who loves Lego. His Lego Agile sessions are excellent. But tonight he's going to be speaking about leadership and how that's evolved in the current tech space now. Obviously, if you want to get in touch with them, there's a social media handle for himself. But without further ado, I will hand it over to yourself, Jon.
Okay, let's just
feel free to take this screen.
Yeah, I've killed your share.
There we go.
Hello, people. Hello. I'm Jon. I know a bunch of you. It's nice to see nice faces. And yeah, I thought I would come along here. I haven't been to AnyTech many times, and I would stick my oar in very much about all things related to how leadership has changed, or maybe could change, or maybe hasn't changed in the course of the last year, but going further back than that. As it happens, I'm gonna preach a little bit about mental health awareness as part of what we do today, and entirely by design, or actually entirely by accident, it's Mental Health Awareness Week, so we are going to talk a little bit about that. If there was a really big number of people here, then in a lot of ways this would be a little bit one way, and that would be okay. And the topics that we touch on, talking about leadership and potentially mental health, would be maybe a little bit more shallow and a little bit lighter. And yeah, with there not being very many of you, I want to contract for this a little bit with you. What we're going to do in this talk. So we have, I mean, my intention was to be done and comfortably done by 7, with a bit of time for you to have asked some questions or whatever you wanted. But what I want to do is I'm thinking that I have a reasonable amount of material that I can go on about. I had in my mind a couple of opportunities for you to talk in slightly smaller groups, to spend a little bit of time talking about how Zoom leaders work, which is not a particularly exciting term that I seem to have coined, and a little bit of time talking about how we can talk about mental health more safely. I say with big, large groups of people, you put not tiny groups of people together, and they, you know, those of you who don't want to take part, don't take part, and that's all right. It seems less obvious. That certainly seems less obvious when you have a smaller audience. So there aren't that many of you here. I still intend to create a couple of these spaces for you to speak about some of these things in smaller groups. But I want to make it equally clear that if you don't want to do that, you'll probably get, you know, chucked in the direction of a breakout room, but you either don't have to stay there or you don't have to take part. That's okay. So everyone has whatever permission they need to take part or not take part. The other thing with this being fairly small is if there was like 50 of you here, I'd say, raise your hands and ask questions. And Chris, can you please manage the questions? Obviously, I'm not going to say that. Let's keep this really informal. If there is anything you want to ask, you want to say, you want to heckle me about, just unmute yourself and sort of holler in this direction at any point. And, you know, I think we may end up with something a little bit more interactive as a result of there being fewer of you. This is being recorded, so bear in mind the level of disclosure that you have in any question that you want to ask. So just manage that for yourselves. And I'm going to chuck in my last bit of contracting, which is probably my favorite bit of contracting for you lot, is be kind and look after each other. I still remember, it's about a year ago, wasn't it? There was a really dodgy incident in the UK. God, that's a really bad way to put it, especially on camera. There was a horrible incident in the UK with a celebrity who took their life, and it started this hashtag Be Kind campaign that faded into the distance far too quickly. And be kind to each other in groups, in rooms, in anything you say. And that's the kind of last bit of contracting that I want to do with you all. Everyone all right with that? Everybody good? Okay, lovely. Thank you all. So let me pop up what I was thinking of. 2 seconds. I'm not sure why I called this talk what I called it. I was kind of scrabbling around for something interesting to say. That's what I landed on. I was feeling in a slightly Asimov mood, and I thought about what do leaders think about? What do they do? What is a leader? Leader, manager, like slightly interchangeable words. But I was thinking back to a couple of managers that I've had over my career. And the answer to the question, do they dream of mental well-being? The answer is sure as hell that they do not dream of mental well-being. They are tough and they are hard people. And I was wondering how they got through helping their teams to succeed during tough times in a remote world. how they would react to people struggling with everything that we've been through over the last year and finding a way to recover or look at what comes next. I thought, wow, this might be really, really difficult for them. So I was really interested in that. And I think that's where that strange jumping mental health sheep came from. So I think that's possibly the only science fiction reference in what I considered might be a very science fiction-y talk. So you're probably all right. Let me just change the view there. Right. So thinking about these particular two managers or leaders that are in my mind, I was thinking, what did leadership used to be? I know that there's various people who will call out what is leadership version 1 and version 2 and version 3 and things like that. There are books, there are management 2.0 and all this stuff. So take the version numbers for what they are. But how did we used to exert authority or leadership or management in an organization? The one that springs to mind for me is always a factory floor where people are producing something on a regular basis, turning out the same thing again and again. Makes me think of a particular kind of manager. If anyone's heard of Daniel Goleman's leadership styles, it's the kind of authoritative manager, the very directive manager, the manager who will use the carrot of, I don't know, his pay rise, you might get a bonus, or the stick, a massive beating you stick of you might lose your job, or you might end up with work that you didn't want to do, or it might be difficult for you here. This is really about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation from the outside. We motivate people to succeed by offering them something they want or offering to not do something that they don't want. Has the assumption that people don't kind of want to be at work. They don't want to be there. And what do we get from that? We get this kind of command and control and do this, micromanagers. And what we get quite often in offices, this is still in my head, is the presenteeism. Sorry, what time are you here till? You're working late. Here, have a carrot. You left 5 minutes before you were supposed to. Here, have a stick. Measure it by walking around. I remember one of these managers walking around late, walking around and seeing who was still there, taking note. And often these managers would also be the expert. People who would get their hands involved in things, get involved in things. I'm good, I know everything. That's why I'm the leader, the manager. Really wonder how some of these leaders are going to fare in the times we find ourselves in. So did we get a bit of an upgrade? And did some people do a bit different? I reckon they did. And I'm now thinking of another manager, another leader who I know quite well, who actually I think he's really quite good. And he will have approached this very differently. And the vision, as a leader, we provide a vision to the people we work with. We provide them with something that they want to be part of, they want to do. Having purpose is really important to people. Being able to bring everyone together and engage them and share this thing that we want to happen. Everyone feels like they have a small part in it and that it's going to happen and we're going to have achieved something worthwhile. Yep, good. It's a bit of an upgrade. And I'm going to replace presenteeism with visibility. Being there. It's a slightly different kind of walking the office. It's the, I'm here and I'm going to have a look around. I'm going to see who needs me, who needs help, who wants me. Everyone's seen me and that I'm here and that I'm available to help and to enable you. And as a way of creating the environment which you can all thrive. That seems to make sense, doesn't it? It kind of makes sense. I can see it. And I particularly think of this almost like slightly upgraded way of leading. And yeah, we've got people who are doing this. We've got people who are doing this. I think there are people doing other things, but I think a lot of our leaders will have fitted into some flavour of these categories. If I just stop sharing that for a minute. What I want to consider, I suppose, is what's happened to these leaders and these teams in this pandemic, where suddenly everyone's gone from knowing how everything is to being in a room apart with a little grid of you all, where if we're lucky, we've got a bunch of cameras. If we're unlucky, and it's Microsoft Teams, we've got a bunch of those like circles with people's initials in. And sometimes they're not even people's initials because it gets messed up thinking which is their first name, which is their last. So that's always good fun too. Who on earth is WZ? Oh, well, actually, that's something to do with which zone of the building they're in, and that's part of their display name. But we've gone from having this ability to be close to people to having something very different. And how have our leaders coped? So what I'm going to do in a minute is I'm going to ask you all, and this is an invitation. You can be part of this, or you can not. I'm going to ask you all to go and have a little conversation about what I'm vaguely terming Zoom leadership. And Zoom leadership, it's that grid, isn't it? And if I just pop this back up on my screen, this is what I'm going to ask you all to do. Where are we? There we go. Zoom leadership. And how many forgot? I'm not going to go for little rooms. I'm not going to put you in pairs where somebody, is going to struggle to step away from this. I am just going to pop you into 2 groups. And if there's a couple of people in each of those groups who wants to have a chat about this, that will work. I want you to think about the leaders who found themselves standing, trying to help a team to succeed in front of that camera there. And I want you to think about what has changed, perhaps changed in what they need to do, changed in what some of them do, changed in how some of them are trying to portray themselves. What challenges has that brought for them? And what opportunities to do things, differently or better has it brought for them? What is this Zoom leadership thing, leading remote teams? And what does it mean for us all? I'm just going to make these rooms quickly. 2 seconds. And my iPad will not join you. Does everybody know what I'm asking you to do? I'm going to give you I'm going to say between 5 and 10 minutes. We'll go for 7 minutes to have a little conversation about this. Does everybody know what I'm asking of them? Yeah. Any questions?
So we're focusing on the leader,
yeah,
and what changes and challenges and opportunities they've had
yes.
from this past year at home.
Yes. So I appreciate that there's some of us here who probably are leaders. There's some of us here who probably aren't, or maybe not yet. And I think that everybody has some experience either, well, certainly from working with leaders and some of us being leaders. And I think that different perspective will be really interesting as well. So yeah, what has changed in the leaders to be able to do this Zoom thing, this Teams thing, this remote thing? What challenges are there for them? What opportunities are there to do things differently and better? It is 56 minutes past 5. My suggestion is, Chris, if you want to pause your recording, probably the best way to do this. Bearing in mind we are recording again, what I would love is I would love just one or two little insights from each of the rooms about some of what was discussed. So room 1 had Amelia, James, Jason and Phil in, and it would be great if there was if there was something that was interesting that you
so a couple of things from our group. I think one of the big things was the opportunity side. So this was something that kind of came from Amelia, was about the opportunity for more trust. So
like
the leaders to trust people, and for people to feel trusted, to kind of to show they can to show that they're doing things, to show what they can do.
Yes, I'm definitely going to go on about that in a bit. Keep going. More things.
And I think one of the challenges, or a couple of the challenges, I think, sometimes you can see people kind of drop off the grid a little bit.
Yes.
There's periods of times where people have left their cameras off. If people are quiet in meetings, it's kind of in physical meetings where everyone's there, it's a little bit easier to kind of go around the room and ask people their opinions. If someone's been like dropped off the grid a little bit, the camera's off, they never speak in meetings, it's difficult to understand or grab a point where it's kind of good to chat with them to find out if there's anything wrong. And I think from that, another one on that sort of line as well is the thing of where you're physically in an office, it's easier to see if someone looks like they're struggling at the desk or if someone's having a bad day. Whereas remotely, you've got no idea if they don't shout up,
I agree entirely. It's one of the things good leaders have always done. And I'm talking a little bit about the one here, hi all, walking through the office, not particularly looking to cause, create work for anybody or check up on people, checking on people. That's different.
Yeah.
And that's something which is really hard to do. Lovely. Anything else from anyone in your room?
I think that was it, to be honest. It was quite a short time, but yeah, it was good discussion.
Cool.
So yeah, it was good.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Phil. Let's see the other room. Gavir, Mandy, Paul, and Chris. Let's have some exciting insights from your world.
So we were talking about the Zoom silence or the Teams silence, where you ask a question or whatever and you just get a wall of silence back. It's awful. But it's trying to get people to get involved without making them feel too uncomfortable as well, by maybe be seen to be picking on people.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's a change in facilitation style can make people very uncomfortable. In a room, you ask a question, you can almost direct it towards somebody, can't you? You can sort of lean a little bit. You can see who's leaning back towards you. You can see who's
make eye contact.
Yeah, they're kind of half going to speak. So then, when I say Mandy, it's not picking on you in the same way. Not something I'm particularly going to go on about today, but the change in facilitation style that's sometimes required to, for want of a better word, run a meeting, run an event is quite stark. The need to, if we want to seek engagement from people in these kind of events, what am I going to need to do? Well, I'm going to need to, if I'm going to pick on people, maybe I'm going to agree that I'm going to pick on people. Maybe I'm going to warn people about the order in which I'm likely to pick on them. Maybe after I've sat through the Zoom silence, I'll say, put your thoughts in the chat for me instead. Maybe I'll break people up into smaller groups because there's safety in smaller numbers rather than larger numbers. And it's different. It's very different. And that Zoom silence, damn, can that be uncomfortable? And Yeah, I usually end up breaking it by pointing out I can out-silence the lot of you if I choose to. But it's quite interesting because there's almost like a defined length of time that if you are silent for, somebody will fill it. You'll find it's about somewhere between 7, 8, maybe 9 seconds around here. So yeah, give that a try sometimes and see how uncomfortable it feels. Thank you.
I think
What
to add
else?
to that as well, there's a different approach to kind of driving meetings forward, because you have to give people the opportunity to interrupt. It's not like when you're kind of doing things face to face, you can maybe stick your hand up or whatever. You don't get that on a Zoom call or a virtual call or whatever you use. So yeah, as a I don't like to call it a leader of meetings, but like the one who drives the meeting and owns that, then there's a different approach that needs to be taken. In a remote
and I mean
world.
these might not be changes in your, I don't know, role as a leader or even your way of being, but they're immediately changes that somebody who's playing that role often needs to learn, new skills, new behaviors, new ways of doing things. I can see that. Okay. Was there anything else from your little group?
Yeah, we discussed how we have to be conscious of people's situations. So they might have to log off at 3 o'clock to go and pick the kids up from school, or they can't stay back after 5 o'clock because they need to feed their family. That kind of thing.
It's very different, isn't it? Because before, I'm not saying I advocate this. There certainly were people who were, well, I'm sorry, this is the time that we work. This is the hours that we keep. I don't know, it's your responsibility to have had childcare at the right times or whatever. And whether you agreed with that or not, there's a much wider acceptance that people's lives encroach on their work, and that we bring the whole person to work. You can see my office behind me. You can see a little window into my house. You can see a little window into all of your houses. I think that that's a significant mindset shift for a lot of people. That's very challenging. Anything else?
It was just the one thing that I was saying at the end, and that was that with my teams, I've tried to consciously have half an hour a week at least where we get together and we talk about stuff that isn't work, so people aren't on constantly. We just talk about what we're watching on Netflix, what we've done at the weekend, just anything that doesn't involve work, just
being social,
team building. Yeah.
Well, almost as if that was a plant, Mandy.
Mm.
I'm just going to talk a little bit about something that's changed. And one of the bigger things that's changed is this is from I pinched most of this from a fellow called David Clutterbuck, who's a coach, largely a team coach these days, I think. He's talking about how social capital is the resources that we get from a variety and the quality of our connections with other people. So we spend time with people. In an office sort of environment, we used to get a lot of that. And there's been a big kind of loss of people's connection to that over the course of the time that's happened here. We some figures pinched from David. In 2019, about 5% of people regularly worked from home at some point, or at least part-time. And last year it was 45. And that might not sound that high, but there's lots of jobs where you can't do it at all anyway. So in terms of office workers, that's a lot. It's a big shift from having that constant social interaction that helps us to feel part of something. We spent more time with our co-workers than we did with our families in most cases. And that loss of connection, that variety, is something which has perhaps in some ways the day-to-day of delivering and working. Maybe you could argue people have been less distracted. They've been more comfortable in the short term. They've been able to continue to deliver, maybe even more so. I've heard a number of big Execs say that their staff are more effective at home, but that loss of connection, a lot of teams have declined over time. The collective performance has declined as that lack of social capital has started to tell. David put this as something we want our leaders to be able to do now, is to help us to feel closer while we're still apart. We need closer apartness. And a bit of a mangled quote I've stolen from Jeff Watts. Jeff Watts is a great coach who does work in the agile software space. So his quote says Scrum Master. I've changed it to leader, right? Probably tell me off for that. A good leader brings teams together. A great leader keeps a sense of togetherness, even when apart. And this is perhaps what we need that we didn't need before. We need to be cared for. We need people to be brought together and to feel that they are still part of a team and that they still have support and connection and are closer despite our apartness. Why did I stick this in here? Yeah, I think I stuck this in here because this was checking up or checking in. And I mentioned before about how important purpose was to teams. This comes from Dan Pink's written a good book called Drive that I'm forever going on about. He talks about intrinsic and extrinsic motivation and how as knowledge workers, we get a lot of our satisfaction and motivation from the work that we do, rather than the drive to here's the carrot or here's the stick. We get our motivation from being able to approach mastery in what we do, from being able to be autonomous and empowered, and having some purpose to what we do. How does that translate into our leaders? Yeah, I think there's a lot of the need for us to be leaders who help people to be autonomous, empowered, and have mastery, but without micromanaging them. The good example, I think this came from one of Jeff's books as well, are leaders checking in on us or checking up on us. And I think the leader who's walking through the office, the leader who's looking around, probably looks very similar, whether they are checking in that people are well, that people are okay, and whether they're checking up that people are at their desks and they're seeming to work hard, at least from the outside. We need leaders who are checking in on people. That's the other important thing. Which made me think of this kind of leader. Is what I almost feel like we need. I'm not trying to be religious here, right? So the cross is just so that you can see what the little people is. But something that leaders have always had a part of is kind of pastoral care of the people that they work with, a responsibility for their well-being. That's probably the word that I would use here, is well-being. I mean, that could be in a lot of places. That could be their well-being and their growth. It could be their health in a mental sense. It could be the environment that they find themselves in. It's this responsibility for the well-being of people. And those leaders who I'm talking about before, the version 1, I don't think they saw this as part of their role. And I think this, in recent times, has been the most important part of a leader's role, is helping people to grow, to be healthy, to be in an environment where they can be well. There are other parts to leadership. I'll chuck them all in at the end. But this one is the one that I think we've been missing from some people in the last year, and that others have dialed up remarkably and been wonderful. I want to talk about a few practical things that I think some of these leaders have done, the ones who have focused on pastoral care for the people that they work with. And I want to pick on a few things that I suppose are quite practical. This slide is very much about people's well-being. And I suppose the assumption I'm making from a selfish point of view, from an organizational point of view, is that a team that is well looked after, a team that is cared for in that way, will be more likely to be a productive team, will be more likely to be a high-performing team over a reasonable period of time. What do I do? What do I suggest that leaders do? And some of these things may seem quite obvious, some of them may not. Check-ins and outs. You've got my Chihuahua check-in on there. You've got the blob tree. Things that help people to be given some space. In some ways, it's a little bit of what Mandy said. It's we're not going to talk about the usual work stuff, but what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we feel a little bit, and we're going to hold space for people. At the start of this meeting, let's find a way to check in with how people are feeling, what's happened to them, and slow things down a little bit. I think that's quite important. I'm going to pick on a friend of mine, a fella called Bertie Hazel, who is an amazing coach, and he's a Scrum Master. Actually, he's a delivery manager. It's public sector, but he's a Scrum Master and he's a coach. And he shared this a few weeks ago, that this was the retrospective that he had just invented for his team. Go for a walk, take a picture, describe it and share it with the team. Tell them about someone or something you're grateful for, and tell them about someone or something that you want to say thank you to. This got a reply on Twitter that I thought was really interesting, and that was, nah, don't like that. It's a bit divergent, that. It doesn't have an outcome in the way that we might want this kind of thing to have. And I thought, wonderful. That's exactly what some teams need. Space to do something, to help look after themselves. Leaders should be encouraging people to care for themselves, encouraging self-care, whatever a person needs to restore themselves, to replenish themselves, to nurture themselves. There's a lot of things I could say about self-care. It takes all sorts of different forms, but encouraging that, noticing when people aren't doing that, and making it easy for them to ask for help. Do I have a way to do that? Not really. You could say it again and again and again. I'm here. Anyone needs me, I'm here to help. No, I'm not in 7 hours of meetings a day. I've made it a big, important priority to be available for people. Safety in numbers. I think I actually even mentioned this before. I kind of mean the opposite. If you've got if you're part of a large team, we'll do exactly what Mandy said. We'll disappear into the background. Or was it Mandy said that, or was it Phil said that? Anyway, people disappear into the background. They vanish. It's very easy to stay quiet in a meeting of 20. It's very easy to be so uncomfortable that we don't want to share, and we don't want to connect, and we don't want to build some of that social capital. Breaking people into smaller groups. What, a pair can sometimes be quite oppressive. There's a bit of pressure there, isn't there, to do something. A 3, a 4, more than that. And people, it's not that they can hide, it's that they might want to hide. And I think it's really empowering to structure some of your interactions with the team around these things that help to look after them. What if you aren't a leader? Anyone can be a leader. Anyone can encourage these things to happen in the teams that they are part of and offer their support and suggest different ways of looking after each other. I'm going to do another one of these in a minute, which has some more practical stuff on it. Does anybody have any questions or reflections on this set of supporting ideas? Feel free to stick your oar in.
It's interesting, the retro one, because I think it's one of these things where everyone feels so busy, don't they? And a lot of organizations, and sometimes you'll see a retro like that, and quite a few people might feel like, you hear this sort of thing all the time, like proper work, they'll feel like it's not proper work. I've got these deadlines to hit.
Totally.
If I step out of that for an hour, that's an hour I feel like I've got to catch up.
I'm going to put that hour back in at 6 o'clock at night because it's easy to walk to my desk.
Yeah.
I recognize that pressure. I see it in a lot of people. And I think the thing that I say to the teams, to the leaders, and to the leaders of the leaders is that people need to slow down sometimes. And we need to give them that space to look after them and to help them to continue to be productive, if you want to look at it from that point of view. I know a number of teams whose mental well-being has declined significantly in the past few months. And some of the leaders don't understand why, because they were productive in the first lockdown.
Yeah.
Why aren't they productive now? And I think we need to find a way to slow down. And the organizations that do that will be the ones that cope better with what's coming in the future, I think. God, that sounds really preachy. Yeah, that's how I feel. Yeah. Okay. Anything else anyone wants to throw in about any of those? Okay. All right. I've just got another page of them that I think are, I don't know how to put it, a little bit less, maybe they're more practical. That might be the way to put it. Ooh, that's the wrong thing. There we are. Yeah, just some more general things. We talked a little bit about how facilitation is different. And I think that something that, we've all been to shockingly bad Teams calls and Zoom calls and things. I think something that, it's almost like a barrier to be removed, understanding a little bit about the tools that we use and the ways in which we can engage people or encourage people to feel comfortable enough to be engaged. Something to avoid is what I'm calling multi-tooling here. I've said this for a little while now. Let's all come to the retro, and what you're going to need is you're going to need Teams, and you're going to need Teams breakout rooms, and you're going to need a Mentimeter, and you're going to need Slido, and we've got these 2 different Miro boards that we're going to use, and it's only an hour long. Everybody, here you go. Yeah, this is almost like simplicity over complexity. But things to do as a leader remain giving people space for reflection, encouraging celebration in particular, getting people to move. They may be really annoyed with you at first when you say, everybody do this, but they'll probably do it, some of them, and they'll move and they'll get some oxygen flowing and they'll get going. Mindfulness is another thing. The number of people who run from meeting to meeting, from one thing to another, and they arrive, they're like, you're not physically running though, are you? But you desperately run clicking, like this meeting's just finished. And now I've got like 20 seconds to get into the next one, because God, no one would want me to be late, because it's not like I've had to travel, is it? I mean, that would be really unreasonable. So I've got meeting after meeting after meeting. And I'm like, almost like, I can feel my heart rate rising saying this to you. giving people time to arrive and to be ready for something. I mean, actually, yeah, the thing I would say about this, if I just jump ahead, people will often arrive at meetings in this kind of stress response mode. You know, oh my God, I'm going to be late. So now I'm looking for danger. I'm in a kind of fight or flight mode. I'm using my amygdala. My lizard brain is going like mad. And I like my heart rate's 15 beats higher than it should be, and my IQ's 20 points lower than it should be. I'm in survival mode because I'm in a hurry. Okay, so this meeting's really important. We haven't got time to waste. Actually, it will be a waste of time being together like this. How do we calm down? How do we get back into capability mode? How do we get people to arrive and to focus and be ready for whatever we're going to do? I remember a workshop I was doing a 2 or 3 months ago, and I hadn't planned to, but started it with just a teensy little mindfulness meditation. It was a really easy one, right? It was near enough. Shut up and don't say anything, and just be quiet for a minute and just breathe. It wasn't said quite like that, but it was near enough that. And at the end of it, asked people how they felt. They arrived properly. They focused. And there was one person who said, I've not had that a minute when nobody was saying anything to me and nothing was happening. And I wasn't thinking about anything I really had to do. And I wasn't planning and preparing for anything for as long as I can remember. That was amazing. I'm ready for this now. Yeah. The other thing I have just for leaders is, I think I said this before, how do you make it easy for people to bring something to you? You just keep asking them, what do you need from me? What can I do to help? And this is the one that's in my head about people who drop off the grid. Who haven't I heard from? Who would I normally speak to? It's probably harder to remember now, certainly outside your team. But who hasn't said anything for a while? Who should I be worried about? Hard to know, but who haven't I heard from recently? It's a good question to ask yourself each morning. Again, you know what? I could say that this is leaders and this is their responsibility. It could be any and all of you. I was going to talk a little bit about psychological safety. I'm not going to go into it in any detail, but I think this is something that has changed a bit, is the safety that people feel. If you're interested, read Amy's book. It's really very good, about the fearless organization. Psychological safety is feeling safe to raise concerns, to chip in with ideas, to demonstrate mistakes, to not be humiliated or punished for that. And this bit at the bottom is new, because I was wondering how this changes. Do people feel safe to turn their camera on and interact when a child might be screaming in the background, or the cat might be walking across, or when they're in there, they don't like the room they're in? How will people feel when they start to be back together and some people are in the office and some people are at home? How does psychological safety change? Phil, I think, was going to say something.
I was actually, yeah. The one thing that really struck me kind of the other day is, I used to, in meetings, like when you got meetings all day, you'd be in one meeting, kind of, you'll have to eat a sandwich or something, otherwise you would never eat.
Yeah.
And I've never, in the last year and a half, I've never ate anything on a virtual meeting, and I've never seen anybody else eating either. And it's like this really weird thing, because I saw Mandy's thing earlier, and I get this, my cat jumps up, and and I have no kind of qualms about that, and I'll give it a stroke, and do you know what I mean, and not be bothered. But I will not eat on a virtual meeting, and I've never seen anybody else doing it. Really
seen a few thing. But it's very rare.
Yeah.
You'll get the message typed into the chat, my camera's off and I'm eating.
Yeah.
Occasionally. But people, I think there's something to be considered here about what will make people feel safer. to engage and to take part. And I think it's different to all the things that we were used to in the office. You know, when you don't have this homogenized environment, everyone's got a different environment around them. I think it's really, really important to ask again, what would make people feel safer? What will help them to understand that they won't be punished for speaking up, for engaging. They'll be rewarded because we'll build better relationships in the team and with the pastor who is seeking to help them and seeking to care for them. I mean, actually, what I'd like to shove up quickly, is this kind of works as well, is I mean, this is a really broad statement, but in the context we've been talking about, I think time spent building relationships is never wasted. And, you know, we feel like we have to keep going and deliver and deliver and deliver, but you will be paid back many times over by that team who are looked after and cared for and build relationships with each other and with their leaders. I think that's really powerful and really important. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm going to pause for a minute because the next thing I want to talk about is mental health at work, which I'm not saying it's like contentious, but no, it is. It is still contentious. But I want to pause. And just before we do that, say, is there anything anyone else wants to ask, bring up, suggest, question? Okay. So let's talk about this mental health thing, and let's do it safely. Let me just pop this back up. Mental health, mental well-being at work. So it is Mental Health Awareness Week this week. And yeah, where does this come from? I'm thinking about the little fella with the curvy mustache in the top right there. And, you know, this is a massive stereotype, obviously, but you've heard it enough times. Stiff upper lip, English, British, whatever. We've got to be very tough. And this goes a lot wider than that stereotype. Strength. It's strong. It's important. It's necessary. Not to show weakness. Especially a leader wouldn't want to do that. But anybody else, you know, if I show weakness, that's going to be a problem. People might take advantage of it. People might think less of me. Oh dear. There's a huge stigma still. Actually, I'd say it's less than it was, but it's still there, around discussing mental health at work. And I think the acceptance that actually that we all have mental health. It might be good in some ways, it might be bad in other ways. I'm going to talk about this mental health continuum as a tool, almost as something that people can talk about. We all have it. I think that leaders who can talk about it, great leaders, admit and share their own weaknesses. Great leaders admit and share their own emotions. And I think this comes back a bit to our pastor, but maybe it's a bit bigger than that. A lot of organizations are starting to tear down the stigma around this. People are speaking out. And I don't know how many places people who work here, who are here at their places of work have mental health first aiders. Mandy, go on. Would you mind saying something about mental health first aiders at your place?
Yeah, no problem at all. I am actually one of the mental health first aiders.
Lovely.
I thought that it was a really important skill to have, to be able to ask questions and making sure that people are okay. So put in one-to-ones with my team this week just to remind them that I'm a mental health first aider, because I've been doing it for probably about 2.5 years now, and I've had one person come to speak to me, and I'm not naive enough to think that nobody's suffering. They're just too scared to say it.
Yeah, I agree. I'm one too, and I offer it up everywhere I go and everywhere I work. And the stigma is still there, preventing people from wanting to come and seek help. And Mental Health Awareness Week is quite a good one. If you find, the hashtag on Twitter and LinkedIn has an absolute bucket load of stuff from the last week. It's worth looking at. But I mean, there's almost a something that helps us to have a little conversation about this. And this is probably the thing that I found the most use from when I explored some of the mental health first aid stuff, is this thing called the mental health continuum, that they do not, the mental health first aid England, or they're called something along those lines. It generally gets abbreviated to MHFA, so mental health first aiders, if you want to look for it. This is their best tool, in my opinion, and it doesn't get shared lots, and I think it's brilliant. And it's about it being this two-dimensional continuum of mental health. And the way they phrase it, which I don't quite like, so I'm gonna rephrase it in a minute, is they rephrase it as this axis here is about diagnosis. So this is about, I don't know, a specific condition, whether you have one or whether you don't have one. On the left, you may have a severe diagnosed bipolar condition. On the far right, you may have nothing. That doesn't mean that it won't change. Over time, probably fairly slowly, we move up and down this axis, left to right, right to left. I think there's a few words that I think perhaps work a little better than diagnosis here. I'm trying to find where I actually put them because I wrote them down so I wouldn't forget. I think this is largely about awareness of yourself and acceptance of what affects you, what behaviours you might experience, what things you might encounter. But we can have, let's say, we can be anywhere on this spectrum, and we can move left to right, right to left. Probably not that quickly. Now, the other one is about well-being. So at the top there is kind of maximum mental well-being. At the bottom, unsurprisingly, minimum mental well-being. And these axes work together. Again, anybody can be. You'll be somewhere on this axis. And we move up and down, back and forth. Probably a lot more quickly, potentially, than we move left to right, right to left. So what do we get here? We get kind of, kind of diagnosed mental illness and poor mental well-being. Okay, that seems understandable. We have people who have diagnosed mental illness and positive mental well-being. Perhaps they cope well. We have no mental illness or no understanding of one, or no acceptance of one. And positive mental health, mental well-being, and equally no diagnosed or accepted or understood mental illness, and frankly, poor mental well-being, and everything in between. And we move around this throughout our lives, all of us. And it's okay to look at it and to think about it and to consider it. I find this a really powerful tool to have a conversation about it. Not a tool where you want to go and say, go on, all rate yourselves and start sharing it. That might be, I was going to say that might be pushing it. I would say, please don't do that. But a conversation about this is really powerful in a work environment. I would generally, if I was going to delve into this a lot more, I would want, well, actually me and Mandy would probably do for the size group, but I would want mental health first aiders about, and I would want us to be, everyone to feel safe and everyone to be looked after. We're not going to go into this anymore. And what I had considered doing, if there was more of you, I'm just going to leave this with you to think about, rather than put you in groups and ask you to do it. I'd like you to have a think about how we could safely talk about mental well-being at work and what the positive impact of that could be. Give it some thought, consider it, and think about it. This said, mental health first aider, if anybody needs anything, you can get a hold of me. Okay. I'm going to stop sharing that briefly. And I'm just going to go. No obligation to ask anything, share anything, question anything, comment about anything. If anybody wants to say anything, they're more than welcome to. Reminding you we're being recorded.
I'm actually had a question about this mental health first aider, because this is the first I'm actually hearing of this term, but do you have any recommendations for resources to, like, if we want to learn more or like become one?
Yeah. So
Andy.
let me put it in the chat easily enough. Now, bear in mind, this is effectively a training organisation, MHFA England. There they are. But they provide quite a lot of resources on their site. I have sketched this week their remote working from home guidelines, which were quite interesting, and shared them. There are a number of, if anyone's interested in becoming a mental health first aider, I expect Mandy will have her recommendation, but I have a couple of recommendations as well for trainers on it. So do get in touch and ask me if you're interested. Yep. Cool.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Right. That's most of what I said I was going to do, but I'm going to do one more thing today, because it feels like it might just about be time for a crystal ball. Won't it all just go back to normal? Yeah, right. Everything I've talked about so far, I don't think goes away. I don't think it would go away even if we did go back to everyone in an office all the time. Some of it may be dialed up or dialed down, depending on whether teams are struggling or not. And we have been struggling, so more of it has been needed. It makes me think about so I could have a big conversation here about the future of work and the future of offices, right? And, I have this kind of, very quickly, I have this kind of belief that there's a load of people who are saying, all go back. And then there's a load of people saying 100% remote. Ooh. And there's a big argument about that, right? So most big companies, or not just big companies, seem to be going kind of, pin the tail on the donkey. We're going to put the tail there. Where kind of, you can come to work 2 days a week or whatever it happens to be, and you don't have to come the rest of the time. And don't worry, that will solve everything. I don't think it will. I don't think that will. I think that's almost like the worst case for anybody. I think there will be a lot of mistakes made, and somebody will find out what the way that they want to go to build a hybrid environment where sometimes people are together and sometimes they're apart, and how we can manage that. And I think it may be more complicated than what we've had over the last year. I think it may be quite a lot more complicated. I don't know what it is. Otherwise, I'd be very rich consulting on it at the minute. What I do know is, this was my thinking about what a leader's going to be. So I talked about a pastor. I'm a coach. I care about helping people to find their own way. I think good leaders can be, good coaches can be very good leaders. Empowering people. So, we've got a pastor to care for people. We've got a coach who empowers people. And helps people to solve their own problems and see things from different perspectives. We've got a gardener. I thought I'd chuck a gardener in there as well, because I think leaders provide the environment for people to grow and get out of their way. Now, you could kind of argue that they're kind of closely related. In fact, you could argue all three of them are closely related. But I kind of imagine them walking into an empty office and wondering what the hell they're supposed to be doing. I don't know what they're supposed to be doing there. But yeah, what was I thinking about these three roles? I think this is about relationships, pastoral care, healthy. Well, no, I'm going to go for mental well-being. I think that's what this is about. I think this is about, I'm going to write challenge first. I think it's about questions and perspective. I think it's about empowerment and trust. This is about creating an environment for people to grow, thrive, support they need to do that. That is our pastor, coach, and our gardener. I don't know what they're going to do with the empty office when they walk in there and there's no one there. I don't know whether they're going to fire up Zoom or Teams and start to lead the way that they maybe have been. But I feel that it's almost like they're some of the stances of the leaders that we need. They're the leaders that we needed to get through the pandemic. And I don't think that's going to change at the end of it. We may need more or less of each of these stances at different times, but a leader should have them. Okay, that sounds really like deep and preachy again. I'm done. I've just stuck those on there because they went on the bottom from one of my sketches earlier today. And yeah, that would be it. Let me stop sharing that. I feel like I've been very preachy about leadership, but I really enjoyed sharing some of that with you. And I've got a few minutes. Anyone wants to ask anything? Anyone wants to weigh in? Go for it.
Oh, personally, I thought that was really, really thought-provoking. Yeah, that kind of a lot of the points that you made kind of hit home. That was really interesting. Really interesting, actually, what Phil said about not eating on a call. Like, I don't know. I was thinking about that like a lot of the way through that. I was thinking, yeah, I've never really eaten on a call before, but I guess it's because it's bound to happen that you'd stick something in your gob and then you'd get asked to do something. Or you'd get asked to speak, and I just couldn't handle that kind of that risk of being on a call and having that.
I've seen the panic. I've seen the abject panic as somebody's trying to like turn their camera on and unmute themselves with a mouthful of nuts.
It might be more the microphone than the camera as well, the crunching and stuff, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. We have to be. Things have changed, and I think we have to. We have to find ways for people to be comfortable. I think it's a really tough one.
One of the interesting things with the mental health aspect is I think there's a lot of thought at the minute about how people are adjusting and coping now. And like you said earlier, I don't think we know what it's going to be like when we actually kind of go back, if we do go back. But I think that, yeah, the thing that I think will be interesting is people who've coped well throughout the isolation and everything, actually that adjustment again to a different lifestyle and way of living. I think it's going to be really gradual as well. I don't think there's going to be a day where everybody, officers announce, right, we'll all go back now. I think it will literally be a trickle and like a gradual change to whatever it is. I kind of don't think it'll be as well, and I know this could be debated all night, but that whole thing of 100% remote or 100% in the office or somewhere in between. I think at the minute, everyone seems to be talking about days in the office.
They are.
So we'll go for a hybrid approach and it'll be 2 days in, 3 days at home. And I think it'll be more I think people might suit better kind of, not even like you might call it a half a day, but not at like one end of that day. Do you know what I mean? Maybe like going in for 4 hours during the middle of the day.
I literally have no idea.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of hedging of bets going on, which is that, yeah, some people want this, some people want this. Let's go in the middle. But do you just think about the logistical difficulties? First of all, nobody will want to be in on a Monday and a Friday.
Yeah.
And offices will have been reformulated and downsized. So, where you're going to get a set of desks for your team. Yeah. And what about the fact that Helen doesn't want to come in on a Thursday because that's when she goes and has a coffee with this person. And Mike doesn't want to come in on a Wednesday because that's when he takes the kids swimming. It's going to be an absolute, if we try and turn around and we say everybody will be in on these 2 days, it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. And everyone's got dogs now as well, haven't they? So everyone's
it's a great example. Everyone's got dogs.
During lockdown.
We're going to need twice as many dog walkers, and yeah, exactly. So I don't know what it's going to look like. What I do think is that it's going to remain extremely complex. I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to struggle to readjust to whatever it is over the coming months and years. And I think this new brand of leader is going to persist and is going to be needed.
Yeah.
And some of that slowing down. Yeah. What else?
Do you think we might run the risk of kind of that whole like 2 days in the approach, 2 days in the approach, 2 days in the office approach? Do you reckon there's a risk where we, I guess, target those days and try and cram as much as we can into those days because like everybody might be in the office on a Wednesday. We're gonna have all our meetings on a Wednesday.
Yeah. That might
Yeah.
make them far less productive.
To which, yeah, I mean, it is a complex situation, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of a place where, you know, when people worked, a lot of places people worked a day a week from home, didn't they? That was a fairly common offer, that people were allowed to do that, and people would behave in a certain way. So, you know, what I'm going to do is when I go have my day at home, I've got all this stuff I've collected together. It's a bit of admin work. It's something I could do with focusing on, and I'm going to sit and I'm not really going to talk to anybody. I'm going to do that work and have that focus time. And I was talking to an organization that was thinking of pushing that up to 2 days before the pandemic. The idea was actually that changes things, because people will have to do things on days in which they're not in. We're like, oh no, well, we could probably cram everything in, just like Chris said. And I think that the odds of us regularly having whole teams together feels low.
I think it's going to change everything, because I think in the office, like pre-pandemic, you would gather around a whiteboard and everyone who needed to be there would be there. If someone wasn't in the room, you could just go out and grab them when you needed them. And now if you've got two people in the office and they're at a whiteboard and they start drawing on it, and then they realise they need somebody in, it's today, that's the day that person works from home. Exactly. So are we all just going to be remote 100% of the, like a remote by default type of living, where we just use virtual whiteboards and we use virtual meeting spaces, even if you're sitting in the office next to somebody, because
that's one of the possible solutions, or at least in the short term, is one remote, all remote. And it's a level playing field, because, you know, I mean, I've sat in sprint planning where 6 people have been in the office and 2 have been on Teams before this. And the 2 who were on Teams were at such a disadvantage that there was no point them being there in a lot of respect. Yeah. The action went on without them. And I think the hybrid solution, at least in the short term, is for, us to use the same collaboration tools that we have used relatively successfully remotely, even if we're partly back together. You know, I mean, all the rumors that we may not have social distancing in the same way in however many months' time, may still be a lot of people very uncomfortable with that. I think the idea of people being expected to cluster around a whiteboard is not going to happen in the near future. Yeah. So, you know, even if everybody's together, what are you going to do? You're going to pull out the laptops and you're going to pull out Miro and you're going to put it on a big screen, aren't you? That's going to be really interesting to see how that goes.
I think from the psychological safety side of things as well, just think we'll probably see a bit of a fear of missing out, you know, like people feeling like they've got to go in the office, or they'll miss out on those corridor conversations and things that are happening, or they won't they'll miss out on meetings that are happening physically. So, yeah.
No, I agree with that. I think that's going to be part of it, is potentially making people feel that isn't the case. And then actually making it so it actually isn't the case as well, as people just not feeling it. And because, I think there's going to be a rush of some people to get back because they feel that they're going to be able to be more successful. They're going to be able to build relationships better. And you know what? They might be right. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. It will be an interesting dynamic. Cool. Okay. Shall we formally stop it there, Mr. Brown, if you want to sum up and kill your recording at the end?
Yes, I will just take the screen off you. There we go. So yeah, I mean, obviously any further questions, just do shout out. But just a big thanks to Jon. You know, that was really, really good. Really thought-provoking, and just thank you very much for taking your time up, and everybody else on the call as well. You know, we know that this takes into your kind of personal time, so we really do appreciate you guys coming along. If you do want to get in touch with Jon, then you can get in touch with him on Twitter. It's Jon McNestrie, or I'm sure you can find him on LinkedIn as well, or he's all over every other social media, aren't you?
You'll find me.
Yeah. equally, if you want to get in touch with any tech, and those are the social media handles there. As I said, just go to any.technology and you can find them all there. So any feedback or anything for Jon or any tech, and then do get in touch. Next month, so our June meetup, we've got Dave Farley coming. So he'll be talking about how we can potentially scale up our software development. So that's 10th of June. So yeah, do look out for the meetup invitations coming out. Yeah,
and he's really good.
He is, yeah, he really is amazing. Like, I forget how many followers he's got on Twitter, but like thousands and thousands. Wrote a book on this. So yeah, do sign up to that.
He's talking about.
But yeah, all this stuff today. Just say, like I said, thank you very much to everybody who's on the call. Thank you very much for Jon for taking the time out to this talk. And yeah, we will hopefully see you next month. Thank you all.